Dear all, welcome to the class of International Economics. So in the last few videos we have discussed what is economic integration and what are the possibilities of economic integration. So there we have talked about two approaches. One is regionalism, another one is multilateralism. In regionalism, we have said so many examples for that. European Union, NAFTA, SAARC, ASEAN. When we are considering multilateralism, multilateral trade agreements are occurring through organizations like WTO. So today, we are discussing what is GATT and what is WTO and what are the role and functions of these two organizations. Okay, so firstly we can discuss what is GATT. The full form of GATT is General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. It is not trade and tariff. Normally the people also mistaken. They say that trade and tariff, but it is general agreement on tariff and trade, GATT. So this agreement, as you know, after the Second World War, most of the countries decided to reduce or to avoid the trade barriers among the countries. So as a part of this, on October 30, 1947, 23 countries signed an agreement related to tariff imposed on trade. And they also decided to reduce the tariff barriers. So this agreement came into force in 1948, January 1st. So this agreement is known as General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. So the headquarters of GATT is Geneva. It is not a permanent association, but it is just like an association, temporary association to discuss the matters of trade and tariff. So it has a headquarters, it is in Geneva, and there are different rounds of GATT. So the final round of GATT, it happened in from 1986 to 1993. It is known as Uruguay round. The 8th round of GATT is known as Uruguay round. And in the Uruguay round, the Director General of GATT was Denkel, and he also has submitted one proposal by combining all the ideas of this Uruguay round, and he submitted a proposal. It is known as Denkel proposal. So through this Denkel proposal and also as a part of Uruguay round of GATT, it gave birth to WTO. So the WTO is the product of these all agreements and also the product of this Uruguay round and Denkel proposal. And it is WTO is also very youngest organization. It has come to being in 1995 only. So on the basis of this Denkel proposal, all the people or the leaders of 123 nations sat together in Morocco, and Marrakesh, it is a city in Morocco. So that's why it is known as Marrakesh Agreement. So they sat together and they made an agreement. It is known as Marrakesh Agreement. So officially we can say that through this agreement, Marrakesh Agreement, which is signed by 123 nations on April 15th of 1994, WTO has established. And also WTO came into being on 1st January of 1995. So after that, the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade became only one major agreement of this WTO. So before that, the GATT was there, but now after the establishment of WTO, the GATT became one agreement of WTO. and there are few other agreements also, like a general agreement on trade in services and agreement on trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, TRIPS. So these all are the agreements of WTO. Now GATT also became one agreement of WTO. So if one person asks, is there GATT now? Yes, GATT is there, but it is a part of WTO now. It is a one agreement of WTO. And WTO's current Director General is Roberto Azevedo. He is an Brazilian economist, so he is the current Director General of WTO. And headquarters of WTO is also Geneva. Now there are 164 members and 23 observer governments in WTO. China became the part of WTO in 2001 only as 143rd member. Then Russia became a member in 2012 as 156th member. Then lastly Afghanistan joined in 2016 as 164th member. So now there is 164 members in WTO. Okay, so this is a brief idea about the WTO. And the first ministerial conference, the ministerial conference is the ministerial council is the biggest body of WTO. So first ministerial conference was taken place in 9 to 13 December of 1996 in Singapore. The 11th ministerial conference, at least once in 2 years one ministerial conference normally happen. So the 11th ministerial conference held in Buenos Aires in Argentina in December 10 to 13, 2017. Then 12th ministerial conference was to be held from 8th to 11th June of 2020 in Nur Sultan, Kazakhstan, but it was postponed due to pandemic COVID-19. Okay, so what is the difference between GATT and WTO? So GATT is a forum for the member countries to discuss and solve the world trade problems. It is a temporary association or organization to discuss the matters related to trade. But the WTO is properly established and rule-based and a permanent world trade organization. Okay, so when we are coming to the WTO, it became a permanent organization or association to discuss the matters of trade and tariff. Okay, and also some other aspects like TRIMS and TRIPS. But GATT is only a temporary forum to discuss these all issues. And no legal status for GATT, but there is a legal and global status for IMF and World Bank. Then here in GATT there are contracting parties, like if two countries are bringing some agreement, or if they are signing some agreements, so they are the contracting parties, not the members of GATT. But in WTO it has its own members. So the rules and regulations of WTO is applicable to all the members. Okay, then fourthly, agreements in the GATT is ad hoc and also provisional, so it is also in a temporary nature. But in WTO, agreements are permanent. Then in the dispute settlement, it will be slow and less efficient in GATT, but it will be fast and more efficient in WTO. And sixthly, only trade in goods. So the GATT is related, or they are handling only trade in goods, but WTO they are handling the rules and regulations of trade and TRIMS. So these all are the matters of WTO. Seventhly, the GATT has small secretariat managed by the Director General, but here in WTO it has a large secretariat with huge organizational setup. But one common thing which is there in both organizations, it is like the apex head of the institutions are Director General. Okay. So what are the principles of WTO? The first principle, it is trade without discrimination. When we are talking about the regionalism, when we are talking about the European Union, NAFTA, or any other regional blocks, we have said that there is a discrimination there among the members and non-members. But here almost 164 countries are the members of WTO, and we can say mostly all the countries are members of WTO. So here there is no any discrimination. So there are two policies based on this. One is most favored nation. So all the members in the WTO will be most favored nation, MFN. So treating other people or nation equally. So all the members will have equal power and equal opportunity, and do the same for all other WTO members. So if there is a one rule or regulation, so it will be same for all persons, not for any particular persons or countries. So there is no any discrimination in this background. Secondly, national treatment. So the treating foreigners and local equally, and also the imported product and locally produced product also will be treated equally. So this is also another principle. So that's why we are saying that it is based on principle of trade without discrimination. Secondly, freer trade. Though the complete free trade is not possible, but WTO always tried to promote free trade, and it might be through a gradual process and also through the negotiation. So the lowering the trade barriers is one most obvious means of encouraging trade. So the WTO always tried to reduce the trade barriers and also to encourage the free trade. The next is predictability through binding and transparency. So if there is a possibility of predictability and stability in the economy, it will encourage the investment, and also jobs will be more created, and a consumer can fully enjoy the benefit of competition. So if there is a stability, so the stability comes from the promise and guarantee which WTO gives. So these promises give the businessman a clear view of their future opportunities. So WTO gives a guarantee and also promises to all the countries. So according to that guarantee, the investors will be ready to invest in that country because it is a guarantee and it is a promise. So through this stability, more investment will be encouraged, and it also will have a positive impact in the economy. So this is also another principle of WTO. Then promoting fair competition. Even though the WTO is not promoting complete free trade, it promotes fair and undistorted competition. So always promotes the competition, but it will be fair and undistorted competition. Okay. And encouraging development and economic forum. So WTO system contributes to the development and also gives special assistance and trade concessions for the developing countries. And what is the structure of WTO? So as we said, the ministerial conference, the ministerial council, a ministerial conference. So it is an apex body of WTO. So all the members will have involvement in ministerial conference, and once in 2 years this ministerial conference will happen. Through this ministerial conference, all this agreement will be discussed and also it will be adopted. So this ministerial conference oversees and also they manage all these agreements and the negotiations and also the contacts are happening through this ministerial conference. So we can say that it is the apex body of WTO. But under this ministerial conference there is a general council. So if the ministerial conference, as we said, it will happen once in a 2 years. So if ministerial conference are not in session, so the general council will act as and they will act as a supreme body, and they will oversees the agreements and other related activities of WTO. And the general council also has dispute settlement body and trade policy review body. So they will involve in that matters also. And under the general council there are different councils and committees, like the committee on trade and development and trade and environment committee, then goods council, then intellectual property council, services council. So these are the council which has a specified role to perform in this organization. So this is the whole structure of WTO. So what are the major functions of WTO? Why there is a need of WTO? Okay, firstly, it shall facilitate implementation, administration and operation of WTO trade agreements. So this is the one important function of WTO. So there will be different agreements among the countries. So these trade agreements, implementation, administration and operation of these agreements are main duty of WTO. So WTO will facilitate all these functions. Then it is a forum for trade negotiations. So it is a platform. I mean, all the country can have a negotiation with other countries in the trade activities. So this is also another forum. Thirdly, handling trade disputes. So if there are trade disputes between two countries, so the WTO will settle these issues also. Then monitoring national trade policies. So I mean, the members cannot implement their own trade policies. They should they should abide the rules and regulations of WTO. So I mean, the WTO also will monitor the trade policies of different nations. Technical assistance and training for the developing countries. Then finally, cooperation with other international organizations like IMF and World Bank. So this is also the function of WTO. So there are different World Trade Organizations agreements, but we are not going into the detail of each agreement because it will take huge time. But we should understand that the major agreements are these four agreements. Firstly, a general agreement on tariff and trade. As we said, the GATT became a part of this WTO, and it became an agreement in WTO. Then general agreement on trade in services. It related to the services trade. Then thirdly, trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. So intellectual property rights and how it is related with the trade. So there is agreement on this also. Lastly, trade related investment measures, TRIMs. Okay, then GATT, then GATTs, then TRIPS, then TRIMs. So these all are the major agreements of WTO. So if we talk about the TRIPS, it is related with the literal work, artistic work and also industrial property. So if you're talking about the TRIMs, it facilitates the investment, and also it tries to liberalize the world trade and strikes out the investment measures which can create hindrance for the free trade, and taking account the needs of developing at least developing countries. Then GATTs, it relates to the movement of persons from one country to another, and air transport, financial services, shipping. So these are related to all these aspects. So we are not going much into the detail of all these agreements. I hope in the future we can do a separate video on this itself. Okay, so You can refer this for details of WTO and trade agreements. I hope you have listened and enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for listening me. See you in the next video.